Okay, hi everyone, welcome back to this live stream for Windows Server 7.3. So I just want to share my screen. Okay, setting general configuration options. The general tab of the server properties dialog box has only one checkbox of interest for remote access configurations, remote access server. When checked, this option allows the RRAS to act as a remote access server. You need to do this so you can switch remote access capability on and off without deactivating or reactivating RRAS, which causes this service to erase its settings. The other tabs in this dialog box control specific settings for different protocols. Note that the tabs you see will depend on which protocols you have installed. For example, on a server that doesn't have IPX installed, you won't have the IPX tab. The other tabs available from this dialog box include the following. On the security tab, you can specify what authentication providers and settings you want the server to use. The controls on this tab are covered in the section configuring security in chapter 8. The protocol specific tabs, for example, the IP tab in figure 7.5 controls settings applied to each protocol you have installed. In particular, these tabs govern whether or not the associated protocol can be used for remote access clients, as well as whether remote clients can reach the entire network or only the remote access server itself. The next section, configuring inbound connections, covers each of these tabs independently. The PPP tab controls which PPP protocols, including multi-link, the client on this server are allowed to use. The section configuring PPP options discuss these settings in detail. The logging tab controls what level of log detail is kept for incoming connections. These controls are covered more fully in the section titled Managing Your Remote Access Server later in this chapter. Configuring inbound connections. The whole point behind using an RRAS server is to allow remote clients to call it, but it's not all or nothing proposition. You can set separate options for each protocol that the server supports, because all of these protocols are carried via PPP. There are some generic PPP options you can set as well. We will look at these options in the following sections. Configuring PPP options. You can use the PPP tab of the RRAS server properties dialog box to control the PPP layer options available to clients that call in. The settings you specify here control whether or not the related PPP options are available to clients. Remote access policies can be used to control whether individual connections make use of them or not. There are a total of 4 checkboxes on this tab. The multi-link control connections checkbox, which is checked by default, controls whether or not the server will allow clients to establish multi-link connections when they call in. The bandwidth allocation protocol BAP and the bandwidth allocation control protocol BACP allow a client and server to dynamically add or remove links during a multi-link session. This is handy because it lets you throttle the amount of available bandwidth up or down on demand, provided you have the dynamic bandwidth control using BAP or BACP checkbox checked. It's only available when the multi-link connections checkbox is checked. The PPP link control protocol LCP is used to establish a PPP HTTP link and negotiate its settings. There are a variety of LCP extensions defined in various RFCs. These extensions allow a client and server to dynamically agree on exactly which protocols are being passed back and forth among other things. The link control LCP protocol extensions checkbox controls whether or not these extensions are available. Windows 9X, NT, 2000 and XP clients depend on the LCP extensions, so you should leave this checkbox marked. The software compression checkbox controls whether RRAS will allow a remote client to use the compression control protocol CCP to compress PPP traffic. In some cases, hardware compression at the modem level is more efficient, but not everyone has a compression capable modem. Leave this checkbox checked as well. It doesn't make sense to enable multi-link connections. If you have only one phone line. In addition, you may want to turn them off to keep a small number of users from using all your lines. Exercise 7.2 will take you through the process of controlling multi-link for incoming calls. So 1, open the RRAS MMC console by selecting Start Administrator Tools, Routing and Remote Access. 2, right-click the server you want to configure in the left pane of the MMC and choose Properties. The Server Properties dialog box appears. Click the PPP tab. 4, to turn multi-link capability off, make sure the multi-link connections checkbox is unchecked. To turn it back on, simply check the checkbox. 5, if you decide to turn multi-link capability on, you should also enable the use of BACP to make it easier for your server to adjust to the payload placed on it. To do so, make sure the dynamic bandwidth control using BAP or BACP checkbox is marked. Configuring IP-based connections. TCP IP is far and away the most commonly used remote access control protocol. Coincidentally, it's also the most configurable of the protocols that Windows Server 2003 supports. Both of these facts are reflected in the IP tab of the Server Properties dialog box. Figure 7.7, the IP tab of the RRAS Server Properties dialog box. The controls on this tab do the following. The Enable IP Routing checkbox controls whether or not RRAS will route IP packets between the remote client and other interfaces on your RRAS server. When this checkbox is checked, as it is by default, remote client packets can go to the RRAS server or to any other host to which the RRAS server has a route. To limit clients to only accessing resources on the RRAS server itself, uncheck this box. The Allow IP-based remote access and demand dial connections checkbox controls whether clients may use IP over PPP. It might seem odd to have this choice because the overwhelming majority of PPP connections use IP, but if you want to limit your server to NetBEUI, IPX or Apple Talk remote clients, you can do so by making sure this box is unchecked. The IP address assignment control group lets you specify how you want remote clients to get their IP addresses. The default setting here will vary depending on what you told the RRAS setup wizard during the setup. If you want to use a DHCP server on your network as the source of IP addresses For remote clients, select the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol DHCP radio button. You need to make sure you've got the DHCP relay agent installed and running. If you'd rather use static address allocation, select the static address pool button and then specify which IP addresses ranges you want issued to the clients in the list below. So I'm just going to skip this exercise here. Configuring IPX-based connections. You may recall that IP and IPX are very similar in many respects. Even though the particulars differ, they both involve addresses that must be assigned to every device on the network. Accordingly, the IPX and IPX tabs of the server properties dialog box aren't that much different. The IPX tab includes two controls that give you power over whether this server speaks IPX or not. The IPX tabs include the following: the allow IPX-based remote access and demand dial-up connections checkbox controls whether this server will accept IPX connections or not. The enable network access for remote clients and demand dial-up connections checkbox controls whether IPX clients can reach only this server or other IPX capable servers on your network. In addition, the IPX network number assignment control group gives you a way to have this server automatically assign IPX numbers to dial-up clients. Your best bet will be to leave the automatically radio button selected. It tells the server to pass out numbers as it sees fit. If necessary, you can manually assign numbers in a specified range. The two other checkboxes give you some additional control. They use the same network number for all IPX clients checkbox, which is checked by default, indicates whether you want all IPX clients to get the same network number or not. Normally, you'll want this to be on so that all your IPX resources will be immediately visible to clients. The allow remote clients to request IPX node number checkbox is normally unchecked by default because it's a potential security hole. When this checkbox is checked, clients can request a particular IPX node number. In theory, this could allow a malicious remote client to impersonate another IPX device. Leave this checkbox unchecked. Configuring AppleTalk and NetBEUI connections. The AppleTalk and NetBEUI tab controls whether or not your server will accept remote connections using those protocols. AppleTalk and NetBEUI are both pretty simple, so there aren't really any configuration options on the tabs, just checkboxes that you use to specify whether your server will allow incoming connections or not. The AppleTalk checkbox is labeled Enable AppleTalk Remote Access, and its NetBEUI counterpart reads Allow NetBEUI based remote access clients to access. The NetBEUI version also has an associated pair of radio buttons that regulate whether NetBEUI clients can see only the RRAS server or the entire network. So I'm going to leave it here today after this live stream. Thank you for listening and have a good evening.